Thank you so much. Yeah, good to be here with all of you this morning, and welcome also to all those on Zoom. I'm not sure if those in the room can see the people on Zoom, um, and if the people on Zoom can see the room with the group that's in person.
The people on Zoom can see a little tiny piece of us. So everyone in
Okay,
the room can wave to the Zoomers.
okay.
Hi Zoomers. Yeah.
Uh,
And the Zoomers are all small. What we should do is close the email so we don't um Jeannie, can you close that? Just close that. Yeah. There. Yeah. So they see a little bit. We could unpin you and show everybody, but yeah, they can see. They can
mm,
go through the room.
okay.
So
It's just nice to get a sense if people can have a sense of each other and it sounds like there's tiny little squares that people can get a sense that there's someone in there behind the square, and maybe that's good enough. But that helps with the sense of connection for everybody.
exactly.
Yeah. And remind me, Jane, what's the time frame for our time together?
We have until 11:20.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
So, yeah, however you would like to use that time. I think we'd at some point welcome some more sitting time or a guided piece or something. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. Sounds
yeah,
good.
and we're looking forward to a conversation around Samadhi.
Yes. Very good. So I'm just curious to see how many of you were here in February when there is the teaching about sila, ethical attunement, just to get a sense. Okay, so most of you, as far as I can tell. Um, but just to sort of highlight that there's these three trainings that the Buddha taught. Sila, ethical attunement, is how I often like to translate it. Often a more classical translation would be moral restraint, but that can feel really heavy. And I think about it much more as an ongoing process of balancing our ethical awareness. And then this ethical awareness then really begins to support this development of samadhi. Unification of mind is one way that we often translate this. And then samadhi really becomes the ground for deep wisdom, for liberating insights that we will look at in the month of June. But today it will be a focus on samadhi. So before I talk more about it, I would actually I'd like to guide just a short sit together, just to see if we can get our own direct experience of some of these qualities that comes along with samadhi. So we'll start with a little sit. So with this, really taking your time, what can be very helpful with this cultivation of samadhi, unification of mind, is to begin to tune into how's your body right now and see if there's anything you can do to support immediate sense of ease in your body. So taking your time to settle, move the body a little bit. You've already been sitting, many of you, this morning. So noticing right now what would support the body feeling relatively at ease in this moment. Letting your mind arrive right here into this moment. Just like putting down a cup of water, you're putting down the agitation of mind and body and letting it just settle as much as it can right now, just from sitting and just from this simple presence of being here right now. Finding your breath, finding your own felt sense of body in this moment. Having a receptive mindfulness, just receiving what's here in this moment. receiving the experience of body and breath. And now I want to invite you to bring to mind a recent time when you acted in accordance with your own values. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but invite that little inquiry, just like dropping in a little rock into the pond, a lake, a pond. See what shows up for you. An action you did, something you said, maybe a word of kindness, holding the door for someone. Speaking in a way that felt aligned with your values. And as you bring this to mind, I want to invite you to see if you can gladden your mind with this reflection. Maybe not a big joy, but maybe just a sense of a quiet joy, quiet gladness. This is what the Buddha called freedom from remorse. And he invited us many times to reflect on our sila, on our ethical attunement, and for us to find joy in that, for us to find a here and now well-being in the mind that's attuned to ethics. Now releasing this reflection and letting yourself drop into a simple knowing of either some place in your body or the movement of breath. And go to where there's already some level of well-being. Don't go to where there's contraction or pain, but find some part of your embodied experience that's already pretty smooth. And let your mindfulness arrive here, opening to this experience. And also seeing if you can invite in a sense of simple contentment, simple joy, simple happiness with just being present. Not trying to get rid of any other distractions, but simply by invitation, inviting yourself to make contact with something that's already good enough, already fairly at ease. Sometimes we can invite ourselves to notice the sweetness of breath, this breath that's keeping us alive, moment by moment. And you might notice the rhythm of breath, allowing it to be just the way it is, but just like you're listening to the waves, if you're lying on a beach, listening to the waves, you're just listening to the waves of your own breath. letting the rhythm of the breath soothe you, settle you, relax you. Nothing to do. Just simple breathing. Making your mindfulness big enough to not exclude what else might be pulling your attention. Nothing to get rid of. Let it be there in the background. It's okay. And then coming back to just something very simple. Body breathing, the rhythm of breath. In a moment, we'll begin to move out of this little practice period. So doing it in a gentle way, maybe beginning to move your body a little bit, stretching, moving, if that's helpful. And letting your eyes open in its own time, receiving sights. And just tracking, what is it like in your body and what is it like to open your eyes? Mm. Of course, I have no clue what all of you experienced. And I can just tell you that my hope was to sort of point to the connection between a gladdened mind and then this ability to settle more and more. And this is a very important connection that the Buddha talked about many, many times throughout his teachings. And again, this component of sila, this ethical attunement, is one of the ways that the mind can be gladdened by just remembering, you know, some act we've done, something that we feel ethically aligned with, and to take joy in that, for us to be gladdened by that type of memory. I want today to talk a little bit about what samadhi is. There's often a lot of mystery. What is it? You know, what is this mental quality, this mental capacity? I want to talk a little bit about how it's experienced, also to maybe give you a sense that you can begin to recognize it. And with that, I want to say that you all know this. So rather than listening for what's not here, I want to invite you to listen for what you might know some of as I begin to speak. Then I want to talk about the types of samadhi that we can cultivate and how they are connected to this liberating wisdom. I won't go deeply into liberating wisdom, what that is, but I just want to make that link between samadhi and deep understanding. Why did the Buddha so many times through his teachings talk about the development of samadhi as an important platform step for understanding? That's what I'm hoping to cover today. So often samadhi is translated as concentration. Many Western insight teachers, that was the first way that we would describe samadhi, is concentration. And some of you may have seen advertisement for concentration retreats. I'm teaching one at IMS inside Meditation Society in July, and I think it's called concentration retreat. So we still often use that word as a English translation for samadhi. But the word concentration is often laden with lots of effort, So when we think about concentrating, and when we were told in school to concentrate, often it was like a forceful placing your mind, putting your mind on something that we needed to understand, So at least, I don't know about all of you, but for me, it's what comes up for me is this tight, come on, mind, don't go here, don't go there, but stay, 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 and now read this, understand this, and so often there's a tightness that sort of goes along with the word concentration. A more accurate translation of samadhi would be to bring together. That's really how we could better translate the word samadhi. We're bringing together the scattered mind. So that's why we often talk about this gathering of mind, this collecting of mind, this unification of mind, which is a little opposite to how the mind usually operates, right? So the non-concentrated mind is by its nature a distracted mind. It will go here and there, and there's a sound, and there's a thought, and it doesn't stay very well with where we place it. Often we talk about that as the puppy mind, right? The puppy mind that we say stay, but then it quickly moves in all different kinds of direction. So the mind that has samadhi is the opposite of that. It's a mind that when we say stay to the puppy stays, just where we placed it. And it's able to really gather and collect around one thing at a time. So it turns out that the proximate cause for samadhi to develop, this collection of mind, is not hard focus, but it's happiness. Isn't that amazing? It's happiness. Aha, okay, what does that mean? That was part of what I was hoping to point to in this practice, right? That when the mind is in a state of some level of happiness, the Pali word is sukha, which means, I translate it as a sweet contentment. A sweet contentment. When the mind has this sweet contentment, this moment is content making, then the mind naturally gathers, collects, and all the scattered energies begins to settle right here in this moment. And I find that very beautiful, that it's not about pulling in the mind, but it's about establishing a basic sense of contentment. And then the mind will begin to gather and collect just as we do that. Like in that image of the cup of water, it's that same process of, when you put it down and you don't keep carrying it around, at some point the energies are going to settle. So samadhi both has this body component, there's a settling of body energies, body calm, settles, and the mind also begins to calm and settle and be very willing to just be with how it is right now. Don't need a big, exciting thing for us to be contented with one moment at a time, one breath at a time. But we all know this from times, well, I shouldn't say we all know this. I want to invite you to think about a time when you were really involved with a hobby, knitting or cooking or hiking or painting, but sometime that you were really delighted by a particular activity that you were in, and you had a sense of losing track of time. So can you call up a memory of a time when you sort of lost track of time and you were really involved with what you were paying attention to? So that would be an example of everyday samadhi, right? That when we're really involved with something, even time falls away. We're right there, and the only thing we're really interested in is in this hobby, this thing that we're involved in, and everything else falls away. And we can enter this state of flow, where, nothing else matters. It's just us and this thing that we're engaged in. And as you may recall, it can be a pretty delighted experience to be fully in the flow with one thing at a time. So the mind that's steeped in samadhi is characterized by being an unhindered mind. So many of you are familiar with the 5 hindrances. Those of you that are a little new to practices, I'm not going to go through the hindrances, but just to say it's all the things that pull us in all different kinds of directions. When we sit down and say, let me just pay attention to my body and breath, we begin to notice that our mind doesn't stay, but it's really clouded by all these other energies of restlessness, of, we want to have the experience that comes after this meditation experience. We want to have a nice cup of tea. Then we're doubting our practice. There's all of these hindering energies that's clouding the mind and makes it very difficult for us to stay with one thing at a time. So that's one of the characteristics of the samadhi mind, is that it's an unhindered mind. There might still be some hindrances, but they're not as hindering. Let me put it that way, that they don't come in and steal your whole attention. They don't make you forget what you're doing, but they might be much more subtle in the background. And the mind is pretty happy with just staying with what you're asking it to pay attention to. So you might begin to sense how this is a very powerful mind, right? To think about the capacity of mind, if it's not as so distracted, you have an incredibly powerful mind. So I'll mention there are 8 qualities that's often described in the text that describes this samadhi mind. So there's a lightness of mind, there's a freedom from sluggishness. The mind is sort of bright and awake, light. There's a softness of mind. It's not a rigid mind. It's not a contracted mind, but it's a soft mind. There's a wieldiness or workability of mind, meaning again that because it's not constantly pull around, we can take the mind and we can say, now explore this. Now stay with breath. Now go to mind. Now take a look at this. That's that wieldiness or workability of mind, that it's doing what we're asking it to do. There is a proficiency of mind, meaning that the mind is very effective, because it's not scattered, and it can see things in a very short period of time because it's not so clouded by hindrances. There's a straightness or an uprightness of the mind, which is again this supported by the ethical attunement. The mind is straight, upright, uplifted. And then there's tranquility of mind. It's free from surface agitation. There is a buoyancy or elation of the mind. It's light, bright, interested. And then it's a mind that's secluded from the usual distractions, the usual sense door distractions. So there's sounds happening, there's sights happening, there's other body sensations happening, but the mind is not really picking them up. Again, the example is this being involved with a hobby. It's not like you're not noticing other things, they're still there, but you're just not interested in them because you're so involved with what you're paying attention to that they don't pull you out of your focus. And now I want to talk a little bit about more about how Samadhi might show up for us, how it might feel, how we might experience it. And again, I want to invite you to know that I'm talking about when I describe this Samadhi, I'm describing it like it's something that's always there, right? But it's actually something that often in our practice comes and goes and that we may not recognize. So I want to invite you all to know that it does happen, it does arise, and you have your own lived experience with this, but you may not have recognized it, and you may have attributed it to other things. So you may just have said, "Oh, that was a really good sit. That was a very pleasant sit." And often it's because there is this samadhi, but we're just not trained to look for the experience of samadhi and how it really shows up in our minds, that we may just say, okay, that was a good sit when there's some access to samadhi. The Buddha talked about 3 types of happiness that we can have as human beings. There is the happiness that comes from sense pleasures. That's often the happiness that we think about when we think about happiness. So this would be the next vacation you're going on, the beautiful restaurant visit you had, seeing a beautiful sight. You can put in what is happy making for yourself. What are some of the things that gives rise to pleasant and gives rise to some level of happiness in your mind? So the Buddha didn't deny that there's this possibility of sense door happiness, that we can have experiences that are that are really it does give us a certain type of happiness. But he also said that it's a very fleeting type of happiness, and we may explore this for ourselves, right? So it's, we may be looking forward to a particular meal, but even midway through the meal, the first bite might be very pleasant. But even midway through the meal, there's only a certain amount of pleasantness that we can have from sense door pleasures. And actually, the pleasantness that we feel has a lot to do with our perception of what we are connecting with. So an example would be having a crush on someone. You may think that the pleasantness is arising, it has to do with them, how they speak, how they sound, how they look, how they smell, everything. And you attribute the pleasantness that you feel as coming from that other person, up until the time that all of a sudden they change. Meaning that it's actually us that changes, that the pleasantness that we are attributing as coming from them is naturally shifting and changing and is fading maybe more into neutrality now, or even unpleasant, but we still think it has to do with them. So there's a delusion there that the pleasantness is out there, and that's why we keep pursuing all of these pleasant experiences, because we really don't really understand that it doesn't matter how many pleasant things we get, that we try to secure, that we try to have. It's not really the recipe for lasting happiness, because it's not in the objects, it's in your mind. The second type of happiness is the happiness that comes from within. It's an unworldly type of happiness that arises in relationship to how things are. But the mind is in a peaceful, in a contented relationship with how things are. Doesn't matter how things are, but the mind is at peace with how things are. And that's this unworldly type of well-being that can come along with the path. And samadhi is this type of unworldly happiness that the Buddha pointed to, where it's just from this finding a contentment inside of us, and all of a sudden the breath, for example, is no longer just this neutral thing, but we can find a very deep, contented relationship to what we're paying attention to. And that begins to give rise to this this unworldly inner type of happiness that's not fully stable. It's still a production. It still is a fabrication. It still is something that we create. So we can't quite hold on to it. But because it arises from within the mind, it's a lot more stable than seeking these external pleasures. The third type of happiness is the happiness connected with the liberated mind, the happiness that's connected with deep understanding, liberating understanding. And that, of course, is the most stable type of happiness. That is an unshakable type of happiness because it's based in really understanding how things are. And that really supports this, this unshakable peace and this unshakable happiness that comes along with this path. To make the distinction between the happiness that comes from Samadhi and the happiness that comes from liberation, one image that I sometimes use to describe this is an image of well, maybe I'll tell this story first. At one point in my life, when I was still living in Copenhagen, Denmark, where I grew up, I was living in an apartment building, and I got a very small garden lot to steward, to take care of. I'd never been the caretaker of a garden before ever, so this was my first time being responsible for a little piece of nature. When I got it, when I took it over, it was totally overgrown with weeds and mostly these thistles that were everywhere. And so I got a push mower, and it took me, well, first I had to really chop them down with, I can't remember what it's called, but a very sharp instrument that you can use to chop down weeds. And then I got this push mower and I mowed the lawn with great effort. And for about 3 or 4 days, it was this beautiful, smooth lawn. And I was walking on it with bare feet and very, very happy and pleased with the beauty and the pleasantness of this lawn. But then, of course, one day I came out and the grass had begun to grow a little bit. And I was walking with my bare feet, and there was a thistle. I stepped right on the thistle. So the Samadhi mind is like this lawn that's been mowed, and it's free, like it's temporarily free of thistles, and then it allows us to see the weeds when they begin to grow up, which we can't do when it's all full of weeds. We can't see the weeds growing up. So the Samadhi mind allows us to see when the weeds begin to grow up because we have another reference point of this temporarily free mind, freedom from hindrances. But then the liberating wisdom is when we get out and we pull out the weeds by the root. They won't get pulled out by Samadhi. They'll get mowed down. It's a temporary freedom of mind. But we need the liberating wisdom to see the roots and to understand that there's an uprooting that has to happen for the mind to be permanently free from suffering, from distress. One of the words that the Buddha used for Samadhi mind is Cheto Vimutti, and it means liberation of mind. And again, it points to this temporary liberation of mind, that this Samadhi mind in some ways gives us a reference point for what a free mind might feel like. A mind that is wieldy, soft, pliable, upright, bouncy, and totally able and willing to stay just where we put it, but not in a temporary way, but in a permanent way. So it can give us this our own direct sense of a liberated mind. So in our Theravada tradition, insight tradition, we often speak about two types of samadhi. There is absorption type of samadhi. It's called in the Pali language apana samadhi. And then there is momentary samadhi or khanika samadhi. So this absorption samadhi, the way that's cultivated is that it will take one thing to pay attention to. And then it will keep coming back to that one thing over and over and over again. Just continually coming back, coming back, coming back. So that one thing could be your breath, just noticing your breath, noticing just the rhythm of breath. Breath is changing every moment, but there's a continuity of breath that we can pay attention to. Or we sometimes can work with metta as another thing to pay attention to. These phrases that we say over and over again, and this felt sense of metta, loving kindness. And there are actually 40 different objects that we can pay attention to. I'm not going to mention all of them. I'm just mentioning those two because they're familiar to many of you. And then the mind, by continually just paying attention to that one thing over and over and over again, begins to really can have this capacity to begin to absorb into that one thing. That could take us into an absorbed type of samadhi where we're fully one with that one thing. This is the pathway to what the Buddha called the jhanas, which are these absorbed states that the mind can move through. And again, I won't go into those. They can be helpful, but we actually don't need them to develop deep understanding. It can at times be helpful to take up this practice of just training the mind to just stay with one thing, and often when we start, for example, mindfulness of breathing practice, that's how we start, right? So we're just orienting towards the rhythm of the breath, the consistency of the breath, the ongoingness of the breath. And then we develop what we can call a unity of perception, meaning that we're not seeing change, we're seeing sameness, same, rhythm rather than shifting nature of breath. This is different than this momentary or khanika samadhi. With this momentary khanika samadhi, which can get as strong as the absorption samadhi, we are aligning our mindfulness with the flow of experience, the ever-changing flow of experience. So let's say we're paying attention to the breath. It is the same. There's a rhythm to it. It keeps coming. So there's a sameness to it. But each breath is a different breath. Has never been here before, will never arise again. Each breath is a different breath. And actually, when we come even closer to breath, each little sensations involved with the breath is a different sensations. Shifting, changing, shifting, changing, shifting, changing. When we begin to develop this khanika samadhi, our mindfulness aligns with one moment at a time, ever changing, ever shifting, and we create a steadiness of mind based on the ever-changing flow of experience. And that steadiness of mind, that samadhi, allows us to just be with one moment at a time in the same way as with the absorption samadhi, but with one changing moment after the next. So you might sense that this could be very helpful for understanding, for liberating wisdom. This type of samadhi that allows us to, in a very steady way, to see impermanence, to see the changing nature of reality in this very deep, intimate way. I like to use the image of, let's say we really had a deep wish to see how the morning became night, that we wanted to see all parts of a day unfolding. And we wanted to see all the weather patterns moving through, the temperature shifts, how the sky would change, how the light would change. And we just really wanted to see the whole day from morning to night. So with our normal mind, we would sit out on our veranda and we would look and feel the change. And we would be in and out, right? There would be one moment where like, okay, now the sun is like this. Now the temperature is like this. Now, the light is like this. And then the mindfulness would drop out, and then we would wake up again, and it would be a change. We would notice a change, but we wouldn't have seen how that first moment became the next moment. But we would just be aware, okay, now it's a little cloudy, and it's a little cooler, and it's a little darker. And then we would fall out of mindfulness again, and then there would be another moment of mindfulness, and now we would notice something new. So we would see how a day changes, but we wouldn't see how one moment becomes the next moment. So when there is samadhi there, we see how one moment becomes the next moment. We see the changing nature in this much more intimate, detailed way. And that's how we begin to understand in a deeper way how this mind-body operates. We begin to see how one thing conditions the next, how things come to be within our own experience. I want to talk a little bit about, I think I'm already sharing quite a bit about, you can begin to intuit why samadhi is very helpful for understanding, for liberating understanding. And we'll talk a lot more about that next in June. But I do want to just point to how samadhi becomes a platform for understanding, and how that is what samadhi supports on the overall path. So, as I said, with the image of the lawn that we have cleared, that clearer mind allows us to see much more subtle layers of how our stress comes about. If the weeds are an image for stress, when our mind is relatively unagitated, relatively free from this stress that we all feel, this dukkha, then when stress arises, we can see it with a lot more clarity. We can see it's arising, and we can feel it's arising. Whereas when we're in a garden full of weeds, that's the air that we breathe, and we are not aware of stress in the same way because it just is the normal. The Buddha used an image of a white cloth to describe samadhi. And he said that, if the whole cloth is sort of dirty and full of dirt, we won't be able to see the speckles of dirt. But if we wash the cloth, then we can see the tiny speckles of dirt. They really stand out to us in a much more clear way. And that's the same way with the samadhi mind, that it allows us in polarity, like the polarity of the mind that's relatively unagitated, and then when agitation arises, we can see the difference, and we can see with a lot more clarity what agitation is all about. So as I said, it becomes a reference point for an unhindered mind, a mind that's a more free mind. These moments of samadhi can become our own here and now direct experience of where this path is leading us. That at some point the weeds are going to be gone, and then the mind will, in a very permanent way, always be at peace, always be happy, and there's really nothing external that can shake this peace, this happiness. And so it can be very inspiring for us to get our own temporary experience that then can begin to give us a sense of, where is this all heading? What is the peace that the Buddha was talking about? And really, it's a piece of letting go. Samadhi develops out of a renunciation, out of a letting go, right? Because usually we pursue happiness out there. And it's only when the mind is like, I don't want to do all that. That's so agitating, always looking for something out there, the next thing that's going to make me okay. And then the mind is like, oh, how about resting back and seeing if there could be a peaceful relationship with how it is right now, however it is. So there's already a letting go that happens, a training of the mind when samadhi begins to arise that allows us to begin to renounce our usual pursuit of external sources of happiness and find an inner happiness that is, again, beginning to teach us this process of letting go, this process of absence of stress, absence of agitation. It's very interesting that we cannot grab samadhi. As soon as we grab the well-being that comes out of being at peace with how things are, it disappears. So if you've ever tried to have a good sit and you want to refabricate that sit, oh, I ate this, then I walked like this, and then I had that reflection, and then my samadhi came. You can see that grabbing for samadhi doesn't work. It actually only develops when we are dropping the grabbing and we're trying to find contentment with how things are. And so it teaches us about letting go. It teaches us about, the path by showing us in our own direct experience that when I try to own this, when I try to put it in my pocket and say my samadhi, it dissipates, it's gone. And then we can have years of trying to recreate it. So that's a great way that it begins to train our hearts to surrender, to let go. We'll move into questions in just a moment. I want to talk a little bit about, how do we develop this in daily life? So proximate cause of samadhi is happiness, sukha, contentedness. So how do you cultivate greater contentedness, sukha, sweetness with your life, with each moment? That becomes the task for someone that would like to develop samadhi. When you sit in formal meditation, but also in your life, how can I orient my mind to what's already okay, what's already good enough, what's already settling, what's already content making? So it's not the big, dramatic, amazing moments, but it's learning how to attune to those ordinary, subtle moments and beginning to find a well-being there more and more. And we begin to train ourselves to notice Sukha. Sukha is a subtle quality. It's not a loud type of happiness. It's a very subtle contentment that we can begin to know in our own mind and begin to recognize. And then when we recognize it, it grows when we recognize it. It grows when we, without grabbing it, we begin to name it and recognizing, okay, this is sukha. This is contentment, just this moment. And it might be fleeting, but the more moments you can recognize, the more it begins to grow. There are two mental factors that support the development of samadhi. So there are things in some ways, this attuning to sukha is a non-doing. You could think about it as a non-doing. It's a settling back, and then it's like, what is content making in this moment? So we don't do a lot, but we relax, we release, and then we open to what could be just content making in this moment. How could this moment be enough? The things we can do is two mental factors that the Pali language is vitaka and vichaya. Often we translate that as aiming and sustaining. So it's a way that we place our mind on what we're paying attention to, and then that's the aiming, and then the sustaining is letting your mind linger with what you're paying attention to. So one image for this is often the meditation bell. So the aiming is like the ringing of the bell, that making contact, and the sustaining is the lingering with the sound of the bell, lingering with the sound of the bell. And over time, there's less ringing the bell, and there's a lot more lingering with the sound of the bell. I wanted to tell you this because often, especially when we're new to meditation, but even when we're pretty, we've done a lot of practice, we often tend to overdo the aiming. So we keep aiming, right? So it's like that overdoing, that hard focus, aim, breath, 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 breath. And if you notice what that does is it creates a ton of agitation. That sort of stabbing, we stab our breath, or we stab the body, we stab what we're paying attention to, and it doesn't settle the mind, but it agitates the mind. So we have to be sparingly with the aiming, and then we have to train ourselves to listen to the sustaining, to the sound of the subtle bell, all the way until it comes to the end. And then it's like, okay, the mind almost fades out, and now you aim again. Bring your mind back to what you're paying attention to, but sparingly. It's better to have a relaxed but slightly, with this samadhi practice, it's better that the mind is relaxed but slightly sloppy than to have a tight but very focused mind. So that little bit of a relaxed, maybe you're not as mindful as you could be when you're sort of noticing. That relaxation helps with the sukha. And then when the mind naturally settles, it's very easy to pay attention to even subtle things and to have this sense of like, when do I make contact again? When do I invite my mind back to notice breath or whatever you're paying attention to? And when can I just listen, take it in, receive the experience. So something to play with. But first is the contentment. So that's the guiding line for samadhi. If contentment is lost, what can you do in your practice to reestablish this basic sense of, could this be enough? And sometimes we may release the meditation object and we might say, okay, the mind feels tight right now. What could I do to invite myself into more relaxation in this moment, to more here and now ease? Okay. So let's let all those words settle. And I just checking in with my own intuition what we should do now. Do we need a little, like 5-minute break? Can people raise their hand if they need a little break? Don't be shy.
Not a single hand went
It
up.
doesn't look like it. Okay, okay. All right. Okay, so let's do a little reflection. So let the words that was just offered drop away. And now coming into your own embodied experience, reconnecting with parts of your body, maybe your breath. Again, inviting the sweet contentment as much as possible, not perfect contentment, but just inviting that into this moment. Maybe just contentment to be in practice, to have this opportunity to practice this cultivation of present moment awareness. Could that be a source of contentment? Simple joy of being present with however it is. And then from this place, I'm going to invite you now to check to see what's coming up for you with this exploration of Samadhi. What might you know about this, even in small moments from your own life, from your own practice? Drop in that question and see what comes up. What is your own mind pointing to in this moment? What's familiar? Maybe not from meditation practice, but maybe somewhere else in your life. Or you have felt a sense of flow, at ease, maybe watching a sunset or the mind very happy to just be present with how it is. And now asking yourself, what questions might you have? What would help to support you? What wonderings do you have? What questions do you have? So in a moment, we'll open up to questions. And if it's hard for you to speak in a group or to speak online, could you challenge yourself? If you have a question, could you break that habit pattern and see what it would be like to ask a question if you usually don't do that? So we begin to open our eyes. They're closed. And now time for any questions you may have that would support you in your practice, support your understanding. And if you usually don't speak, I would invite you to try. Great question. That's the job of liberating wisdom. It's only the liberating wisdom that's going to allow us to find peace in each and every moment, no matter what the conditions are. Samadhi is a fabricated state, and it comes about through causes and conditions. So some of the causes and conditions that the Buddha described is a secluded environment, is good friends, is a contented mind. So there are all of these things that support Samadhi. And actually, without those supports, we get to see that it's still a fragile state. So this is great because now we don't get attached to it because we see, wow, it is beautiful and it's a lot more stable than pursuit of sense pleasures. But nonetheless, it's not really reliable. And we have to be able to see that every conditioned thing is an unreliable thing. There's no true refuge in conditioned experiences. And that then will take us to, it really is this deeper understanding of the true causes of suffering that will give us a understanding that will allow us to feel peace in each and every moment. So what do we do then? Well, we try to cultivate samadhi under the right conditions, and we don't demand that our mind is going to be in a state of samadhi, this temporary state of well-being in conditions that are too demanding. At least it's not going to go very deep, right? So you can orient your mind to say, you know, how could I find equanimity, right? So that would be the role of equanimity. How can I find balance with how things are? It's unpleasant, but how can my mind be in a non-contentious relationship with things are in this moment, even though it's unpleasant or it's difficult and body is cold and there's sickness. So that's really the role of equanimity. But likely samadhi, this unhindered mind will only develop under certain conditions. As we get, as we develop it more, as we deepen the practice, samadhi is a little bit more accessible also in other conditions, but it is a fragile fabrication that we can't cling to, which is good to see. It's part of the letting go process and the understanding process is that how beautiful this is, and I can't put it in my pocket. I cannot possibly keep it, and I'm going to suffer a lot if I try to own it as something. Now I've got this, now I know how to do this. That takes us deeper into the path of saying, what would I need to understand to really feel at peace in each and every moment? So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let the settling happen very gradually. Often we come right in and we close our eyes and then we connect with, I'm going to practice mindfulness of breathing or whatever you're practicing. Take your time to be aware of body and space. And just like you're putting down that agitated cup of water, let that settling happen organically. Let that be the first part of your practice, just settling. Awareness of self and space, awareness of body and mind. And then you just let yourself settle, settle, settle. And then this gladdening of mind, find something that gladdens the mind, that uplifts the heart. So a little reflection can be helpful, okay, I'm here right now. That could be one way. Just whatever happens in my practice today, I'm just glad to be here. This is special that I get to have the time to practice. Or again, a time where you align with an ethical value, a recent time when you can gladden your heart with your own sila practice. And then when you then invite this gladdening, take your time to reflect and let your mind be gladdened just for a little bit. And then feel the whole body, feel the breath, feel the mind. And then slowly, slowly begin to connect with what's your primary object. So you make that little aiming, make that connection, and then you receive, 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 receive. And then the mind might drop off. You make the connection again, gently, gently, just like a cotton ball touching, cotton ball, not like a forking, but like a cotton ball touching lightly, and then you wait. Receive, 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 experience of breath. And then whenever you notice that tightness happens, say, okay, primary thing is this sukha, this ease, this happiness. What could I do right now? Even if it's leaving my meditation object for a moment to reestablish sukha in this moment. And then you settle, and then the mind can begin to make contact. And then you just continue, continue, continue.